So, hello everyone, and welcome to week 6 of digital marketing. For this week, the major thing you'll be working on is the is your conceptual assignment, which is due at the end of this week on February 19th. And in fact, there is no reading this week, or was no reading last week, so that you can concentrate on that. There is a new reading up for next week that will be specifically on the topic of Amazon ads, right? And so we'll be discussing that next week. But for this week, I really want you concentrating on the conceptual assignment. And in fact, I'm going to take most of the time today to talk through. Sorry, that's something stuck in my throat. Talk through the conceptual assignment and kind of see if there are any questions around that. Now, in addition, of course, you also turned in, hopefully, on yesterday your project introduction, and so those will be grading this week, and we'll be double checking all the team contracts to make sure they were all filled out and submitted properly. As I mentioned before, we're not grading the team contracts, but you should get comments back on the project introduction. Our goal is usually to get it done in 1 week, right? But sometimes you might have to give us a day or two later than 1 week just because of the number of students in class, right? But in general, we should get turnaround times within 1 week. And so the second thing I wanted to spend some time talking about that's directly class related today is around the idea of the next turn-in, right, which is going to be your situation analysis. And I know it's a little ways off. You got almost a month till that's due, but I did want to kind of just briefly highlight it a little bit to talk about it and discuss what's going on. And of course, in addition to the actual assignments and everything like that, we also have 7 new videos up for this week on search, right? And so this is a big area that we're going to talk about in class. Search engine optimization, search engine marketing, things like that, so that you have some idea of what's going on in the space. Now, I haven't added a reading along this yet, and I should shortly. In fact, maybe I will work it in by the end of the semester. But honestly, I wanted to kind of quickly comment that search may change dramatically in the near future, and given that as kind of a teaser. Anyone want to guess why I think search is going to change dramatically, or why many people think search is going to change dramatically in the near future?
Well, Chat GPT and AI.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Rachel?
Yeah, I can't think of the name of the one that's not Chat GPT. It's the
Google has something called Bard. Is that what you're thinking?
Bard. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
How's that going to change things? What will that mean?
So what will it mean? I'll ask that back to all you all. I'm happy to kind of talk this through, but what do people think? How is ChatGPT and Bard potentially going to change search? So ChatGPT, by the way, it was produced by OpenAI. OpenAI is a kind of not-for-profit, but really they hold all their code kind of close to their chest, and is funded by a lot of for-profits. So Microsoft in particular has a huge investment into OpenAI. And then there's a bunch of tech startup companies that basically have invested in it as well. But how will ChatGPT and Bard potentially transform search? Any thoughts?
So I've started using ChatGPT just for the kicks to understand what it is all about. And the first thing that obviously you'll see is that they have a very big search bar, which basically you can write up text, and it's like literally what you're thinking in your mind is basically what you can put there, and it'll give you suggestions. And like just for example, if it was Google, you would say Indian food near me, and then it will give you a list of restaurants. But in ChatGPT, it can be more specific, like Indian food that is not so spicy for that is accommodative to kids. Then it will give you a different set of suggestions, probably, like that's basically a very crude example, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and I think we can get even more creative beyond that, right? Like, imagine that search transforms from something that is searching just for documents that already exist on the web to answer your question, but instead is searching for are there a bunch of things on the web that I can put together to answer your question, right? So for instance, one example that I heard about recently on the radio that I think is a compelling example, as a podcast, I think it wasn't the radio, but was I want to buy, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a couch at IKEA, right? Like I want to buy this couch and I want it already built, like maybe it wasn't IKEA then. It must have been someplace else. It must have been someplace where they don't ship everything in flat packaging, right? But I want to buy a couch at a particular store. I'm going to pick it up. I own a Subaru Outback, right? Will the couch fit in the back of my Subaru Outback, right? Like, imagine if you could ask that to a search engine, right? And it was able to figure out, by figuring out the dimensions of the couch, figuring out the dimensions of the inside of an Outback, and tell you whether or not it could fit in there, right? I've been playing around. Sorry, there's people wondering what the name is. So ChatGPT is a technology. Let's take a step back. ChatGPT is a technology that was developed at a company called OpenAI. Right, and OpenAI basically built it's a language model. Is really what ChatGPT is. So it's set up to allow you to kind of play around as if you're asking questions, and to respond in a very nice way. I have an account. Let me see if I can. So it's become so popular recently that sometimes I can't get in, even though I have an educator account that's supposed to allow me to play around with it more often. But let me see if I can pull it up real quick. See if we can get it. Log in. But the interesting thing about ChatGPT that you have to remember is it's built to create good language, right? It's not necessarily built to be correct, right? And so, in fact, Google demonstrated integration of Bard recently, using, which is their version of ChatGPT, and it got the answer wrong in a live demonstration. Immediately, almost, Google's stock price went down by about 7%, which is a huge tank, right? These tools definitely need some work, but let's see. It looks like I got it up and running. Let me demonstrate this a little bit too. But while I'm doing that, Alakananda, it looks like you have a question.
Oh, no question, actually. I want to share one of my funny experience with ChatGPT.
Okay.
So the other day I searched in the ChatGPT, so we were doing some stock evaluation for Pacific Gas and Electric Company.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wrote, what was the financial performance of PCG on 2021? And it just told me to go and look for their financial annual report. It didn't say anything.
Yeah. So the idea is that these tools will eventually be able to help us be able to do better search and to create better content and things like that, right? So they have some examples here. Explain quantum computing in simple terms, getting creative ideas for a 10-year-old's birthday. How do I make an HTTP request in JavaScript? They're really good at like programming stuff and very concrete stuff, right? They're a little bit harder about stuff that's a little bit more difficult. But like, for instance, the other day, this is one I was playing around with it on my phone. I was in Nashville just last weekend for a conference. And I said, plan a Sunday morning set of activities in Nashville, Tennessee, right? So, it basically comes up with, just like, it's not pulling this text directly from anything, but it's basically looking at a bunch of text about what to do in Nashville and then putting it together in a way that makes sense. So, it says visit the Country Music Hall of Fame, grab brunch at the Southern Steak and Oyster or Biscuit Love. These are all things that you could easily do in Nashville, right? So interestingly enough, though, ChatGPT, this current version, hasn't been trained up. It was only trained up through 2020. So anything that's happened up after that is different. So for instance, we went to a restaurant called The Continental in Nashville, and I asked it, what should I order at Sean Brock's The Continental, right? Oh, that's weird. I've never seen it do that before. What should I order at Sean Brock's The Continental? So here's what's funny. Sean Brock's owns a bunch of restaurants, but the Continental was opened after ChatGPT was trained, right? It was opened in 2021, I believe. It gives a nice set of recommendations here, but you can't order any of these dishes at Sean Brock's The Continental because the Continental is a steakhouse, right? Whereas his other restaurants, the Husk, which is probably the more well-known one, is more of a Southern restaurant, right? Or things like sea crab soup. So what's amazing about this is that if you read the description, it sounds very much like it knows what it's talking about, right? So if I say none of those things are on the menu at the Continental, it's smart enough to say, I apologize, it seems my information is out of date. The Continental is a restaurant that changes the menu based on seasonal ingredients, so it's possible some of the dishes I made. So it's very capricious. Like the way you talk to it, a lot of times it's never going to say, I don't know. It's going to always try and figure out something, right, about it. And so it's a fun little thing to play around with. But right now, I don't think it's going to, substitute completely for web search or anything like that right now. But I would recommend if you're in marketing at all, or you're interested in these technologies, create an account, play around with it, because I do think that this stuff is going to be integrated into our search engine shortly, right? What's interesting about that is if it is integrated, Google had some interesting problems with when they started just providing what they called snippets, which are facts, right? So if you type in lyrics of a song into Google, right, it will automatically just show you the lyrics of the song. But a lot of times it's capturing that from other websites. Those other websites have ads and stuff like that on them that if you went to the website, they would make revenue off. So Google was in a way stealing revenue from them. If you see recently, Google has stopped doing that for a lot of websites. So now a lot of times it won't let you actually see the lyrics. You have to click on the link to Genius or something like that, because it realized Google only makes money by indexing other people's websites. And if it starts just showing you the content directly, yes, it keeps people on Google, which is good, gives people a more direct answer, which is good. But if other people stop publishing that information or stop allowing Google to harvest that information, then they lose out on that information. And so ChatGPT and Bard for Google, it'll be interesting to see, because I don't know if you can do, what's the incentive as a website for me to make my data available to Google and Bard if Google and Bard are going to take, Google and Bard are going to take all the revenue, right? And I'm not going to ever get someone visiting my site, right? And so that's one thought I have on this that's going to make this a little bit difficult. But, for a random question, like for very specific questions that aren't going to be answered on websites, then maybe it makes sense. Like, will this couch fit in my car, right? Then, I don't know if there's a website that's going to be, specifically devoted to whether or not couches fit in cars ever, right? And so it might solve those kind of problems. Any thoughts, comments, questions about how ChatGPT and everything is changing search?
I mean,
so I've seen Google is also trying to integrate its Google Lens search, which is also going to be a game changer, I believe, recently, because you could basically point your camera to a logo or your marketing brand or something, and then it could probably take you to their website or something like those lines.
Yeah. So that's another. I mean, I do think that visual search, which is what you're talking about, VJ, and then also, and we do talk a little bit about this later on in the class. Voice search, right, are dramatically changing what's going on in the landscape as well. Yeah. Especially because visual search usually is taking you directly to a particular site, as voice search. Voice search, you know, when I talk about that, I mean, like when you ask your Google Assistant or Siri or whatever, right, for a search question, the thing that's different about that is you only get one response usually, right? You don't get two or three, right? Jason, I saw you were about to say something too as well.
Yeah, so I guess my concern is there's already so much tracking with searching today, even on like my company computer, where I would say its firewalls are really good and whatnot. So with these new search engines, do you think that it's only going to get worse? And how much do you think that will bother people? Like, because they have those new search engines, I think it's called DuckDuckGo or something, that's supposed to prevent that. I don't know how much that happens.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. There's a lot of tracking that's going on. I don't think the actual amount of tracking would be would be any different. But what will change is the kinds of content and information that people will have, right? Like Google's still just going to be logging your search queries, right? They're not really going to be doing much other than that, which is what they've been doing all along. But the types of questions you'll be able to ask might be more personal, might be more invasive, right? When in the space of with AI enabled search engines, right? Instead, so that is a concern. I think DuckDuckGo is a privacy preserving search engine that works pretty well. I actually use one. It's not, rather than using DuckDuckGo, I use something called Brave. Brave is a full browser that also has its own search engine as well. And what I like about it is that, you know, so the question becomes, if we're not, you know, the reason why does Google track? Google tracks so it can sell that information to advertisers, right? And so then it can make money off of the money it's making from advertising, right? Brave, the way it works instead is as you view advertisements that it displays, it actually deposits a cryptocurrency into a wallet for you. And then you can choose which publishers to send that cryptocurrency to, right? So rather than having the advertisers be the ones in the middle, which is an interesting model. I don't know if it's going to work, but you know, I'm going to experiment with it and play around with it for a little while, right? And see how it goes. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, of course, you know, and like any new technology, I'm sure there's new privacy invasive invasions that can go on as a result of AI for sure. Just in case anyone's interested, I did have a longer, if you're really interested in this topic, I'll put this up on the Moodle somewhere. I'll figure out a way to do it. But I did a little bit of an interview for the Poole College Thought Leadership on ChatGPT. And here it is. And I'll put it into the links into the chat bar, but also put it up on the Moodle eventually. And in fact, you know, one big concern about ChatGPT and Bard is if it's that smart, what's to stop students from just putting homework questions into them and then getting back the answers and then copying and pasting them into their responses, right? Which is why if anyone closely read my syllabus at the beginning of the semester, I specifically have a policy that says you cannot do that without my permission, right? And you know, and luckily there were a bunch of tools that were released to educators that detect if ChatGPT or Bard is generating text, right? Like you could take a block of text, throw it in there, and it'll tell you if it was generated by ChatGPT because it does have certain characteristics that make it obvious, right? In fact, I'm going to be the whole University of North Carolina system is having a committee on ChatGPT, and they've asked me to present my thoughts and findings on it to that committee. So I'm going to be talking to them in a couple of weeks about what's going on with ChatGPT. So yeah, it's interesting, and it'll be very interesting to see how it changes the world. Any other questions, thoughts about that? That wasn't really. Well, I didn't mean to spend a lot of time talking today, but since this week's videos are all on search, I think this is a very relevant conversation to be having. So
I was actually just having the thought, this is so random, that my mom, who currently tries to use Google she talks to Siri, and never gets the result that she's looking for because she's speaking in full sentences with lots of extra words, this might be her chance
Yep.
to actually get a search result.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, that reminds me a little bit. I don't know.
It's
if you
kind of
ever-
sad. Like that's been a family joke for years now. Don't let my mom watch this recording.
She's just been ahead of her time.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah. I won't play the whole thing, but you're reminding me a little bit of a SNL sketch. I don't know if you saw this one. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can get this up and running correctly. Recommend watching it if you're interested. It's kind of funny, but it might very well be the case that we're getting closer to that world where you don't have to phrase your questions in the correct way, or even maybe address Alexa by the proper name anymore. Okay. Any other comments or questions about ChatGPT and search and how that might change things going forward? Well, let me switch topics then, and let's talk about the. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to start that back up. Let's talk about the conceptual assignment. Okay. And by the way, I call this one the conceptual assignment and the second one the analytical assignment, just because at this point in the class we haven't really gone through all of the analytical aspects and the optimization aspects. So this one, it just focuses a little bit more on the on more concept oriented questions rather than the analytics and tech and kind of more mathy type questions, if you will, later on. So in particular, I gave you a reading from Marketing Dive, which is kind of, I like the way they write a lot of times, but this one specifically just came out, focuses on Martha Stewart and her involvement with Oreo, where they're releasing the limited edition Most Oreo. And what I think makes it the Most Oreo is that the cream filling is actually a cookies and cream filling instead of just the plain cream filling. And so as part of this, they built an entire world in Meta, which is Facebook's Horizon Worlds, which is probably the largest. I don't want to say it's the largest metaverse out there. It's the largest metaverse platform because you can link multiple metaverses into it, basically, right? I mean, I think that probably Fortnite or World of Warcraft or one of these is probably the largest metaverse, I would say. But within Meta's Horizon Worlds, they've built Oreoverse. And you don't have to log into Meta's Horizon Worlds to play around with Oreoverse. You can just go directly to the Oreoverse website, and you can kind of move around in it without having to have the whole VR setup on. And they even had Martha Stewart live streaming herself exploring the Oreoverse, and things like that going on. So I'll give you a little article to read up about it. I would highly recommend that you also spend some time actually reading about the metaverse itself and other places. And I think it's probably useful if you were to go and explore the Oreoverse yourself, just to kind of understand a little bit. I went through it. I played a couple of the games. Some of them are easier than others, I'll say that much. One of the ones where you have to stack all the Oreo parts on top of each other, I thought was one of the harder ones in there. But go ahead and play around with it. And then basically I want you to answer questions about it, right? So there's 5 questions. I'm asking for a half page for each question, roughly, so 2 to 3 pages in total. The first question is basically, for several product categories such as entertainment products, and like what I'm thinking about here is like these concerts that happen in the metaverses, the sports events, things like that. Marketing in the metaverse, it makes a lot of sense, but Oreo's a food, it's a CPG brand, and obviously you can't actually eat anything in the metaverse. Well, you can pretend to eat stuff, but you can't eat it. So it seems like maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, right, for especially something that's focused on such a visceral experience as eating. So describe the pros and cons for a company like Oreo or like Mondelez's Oreo brand specifically, switching to metaverse advertising, both in the short and the long run, right? So again, the rubric here is I'm really looking for both short and long term. I'm very looking for pros and cons, right, that are logical for the answer, right? The second one is just to ask you to generally evaluate the advertising that they're doing, the Oreoverse. I don't want you to redo. The first question is more general questions about what are the pros and cons of metaverse advertising. The second question is specifically about Oreoverse, right? Is it a good idea that they're doing this or not? What, in the context of either brand awareness, brand engagement, or word of mouth, what is the goal of the Oreoverse campaign? And do you think the campaign successfully supports that goal? Why or why not? Provide support for your answer. And of course, you don't have internal numbers to know exactly what the conversations are. So I'm asking you to provide your best educated guess as to whether or not this campaign will achieve the goals that they're attempting to address. Right? Any questions about those first two questions? They're kind of related, so that's a good place to pause for a second. Okay. Well, the next question that came up, right, was around, so the next question is around social media ROI. And of course, we discussed this in the sync sessions earlier, but the first thing to do is just explain what social media ROI is how that concept could apply to the Oreoverse campaign. And if the goal of the Oreoverse campaign is to generate positive word of mouth, for instance, describe how that would happen, right? So I want you to provide a hypothetical explanation as to how this is going to increase, is going to have a positive social media ROI, right? The fourth question is kind of related to that. So those social media ROI is not about revenue. We do need to justify how marketing actions will eventually lead to revenue, describe in detail how the Oreoverse campaign could eventually result in higher sales revenue for the firm, right? And so this might be a more long-term description that you want to put in there. So those two are kind of related. Any questions about either of those two? So the final question, and this is where, this is also going to be tied to your group project. Because one thing you're going to be doing for your next part of your group project is identifying 3 to 5 SMART goals for your organizations, right? In this one, I want you to identify a SMART goal: specific, measurable, attainable, attributable, realistic, and time-bound objective for the Oreoverse campaign. Now, again, we don't know what Oreo sales are, or how much word of mouth Oreo gets right now, or anything like that. And you don't know for probably some of the companies you're working with either. So what I'm really looking for you to do is to set up a goal that is somewhat realistic, given, kind of a general knowledge about what's going on. So, something like, I don't know if you want to use this one, but, the most Oreo will see sales increases of over 10% per week after the launch of the campaign for 3 months, or something like that, right? That would be an example of a very specific SMART goal. Probably not the one I would necessarily recommend for this campaign, which is why I'm throwing it out there, but it is a specific SMART goal, right, that is in this space, right, that you could have in there. And then what I want you to do, once you have that SMART goal set up, I want you to also identify 3 KPIs. And by KPIs, I mean key progress indicators. And let me take a step back here. This is something where people often get confused between what a SMART objective is and a KPI, right? So a SMART objective is something that the firm can't just do, right? That they have to put effort in and then observe a result, right? So it's something like sales or revenue, or number of mentions on Twitter, number of Facebook likes, or something like that. The company can't just do those things, right? The consumers have to do them. That makes them a SMART objective. KPIs are something you can help to diagnose why you are not making progress or are making progress towards your objective, right? So if your SMART objective has to do with sales, right, then you could have a KPI that's related to to the number of mentions of the product on social media, right? It's not directly related to sales, but it helps you diagnose, especially in a case like this where some aspect of social media is going to be a big component of the campaign, whether or not your campaign is having the effect that you expect it to have to eventually lead to sales, right? If that makes sense, right? So this is the way, so KPIs aren't objectives, right? KPIs let you diagnose why the campaign that you launched is not resulting in the objective, you achieving the objective that you planned, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Kind of, it's a little bit tricky, and I think people a lot of times will either state a SMART objective. And let me tell you the things people fall down. One is that people state a SMART objective that's just something the firm can do, right? So a SMART objective is that, Oreo will, build 5 new mini games in the next 3 months, right? That's not a SMART objective because that's just a task. That's a tactic, right? That's something Oreo just has to do. It's not something they need to achieve, right? They just have to put the effort in and they can have it. SMART objective is something that requires almost a consumer response or a stakeholder response that's outside the firm, right? Where they can just do it, right? So that's one thing I often see as people label as SMART objective that's not a SMART objective. The other thing I see is that people label their KPIs, label their SMART objectives as KPIs. So you could have a SMART objective that is increased revenue or increased sales, and then they'll also have a KPI that's like, also like increase, track the amounts of sales over time, right? That's not going to help you diagnose why you're not getting sales if because it is the objective, right? So the KPI should be intermediate measures that can help you diagnose why you're not achieving your objectives, right? Any questions about that?
So KPIs are short-term, SMART goals are more for the duration.
Well, KPIs aren't goals, right? They're things you track. They're key progress indicators, right? So, but yes, they are often shorter term measures. Let's put it that way, right? So for instance, let's say my goal is to get mentions of this campaign, right? Up on Twitter, right? Then one of my key progress indicators could be number of unique visitors to my Twitter account, right? Or number of unique followers of my Twitter account, right? Over a month. So it's not really a goal. And I'm not saying I want 10,000 followers. I just want to know the number, because then if I have that number, if I know if it's going up or down, I can help diagnose why I'm not seeing those mentions that I want to see. Does that make sense, Jason?
It does.
Okay. Any other questions? So the final part of this, as you can see, is to justify that objective as to why it is important for the brand. So make sure you do that as well, right? Provide some explanation as to why that SMART objective is useful. Okay. So this is the only sync session that we have before this assignment is due. So I want to, if you have additional questions, feel free to email me later. But I did want to make sure that if anyone has any questions or concerns about this, that we get them out as much as possible. Okay. Well, if something else comes up, let me know for sure. Like I said, I'm going to spend a couple minutes more, and then we can maybe end a little bit early today talking about the next part of the group project, because we don't have a reading this week. So I do want to talk a little bit about that. So this is not due for a while now. It's due. I can look that up quickly, hopefully. Actually, not as easily as I thought, because I don't have it easily out. I think it's due in about 1 month. But the next section that's going to be due for your group project is this section, sections 5 and 6, right? And let me blow this up a little bit. There's a little handle down there. Way I can do this. There we go. Okay. So Section 5 is essentially asking you a set of group of questions. The first question is basically examining, the first set of questions are essentially asking you who the target market of your firm is, right? And estimating the size and demographics and aspects. The second group of questions is really asking you about competition, right? Who are the competitors for the firm, right? And then kind of specifically asking you to kind of provide a quantitative analysis, quantitative/qualitative analysis of how well the competitors are doing in the digital marketing space, right? The final set for the situation analysis section is to actually do a kind of traditional situation analysis. Now, you can do, you know, as many as you want, right? But I really place the emphasis on SWOT analysis. I think is probably the most useful general tool here in general to kind of understand what the firm is doing. And so you're kind of looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. For those of you who've never done one of these before, hopefully by this time in your MBA careers, you've all seen SWOT analysis at some point. But strengths and weaknesses are internal to the firm, right? So they only exist. They only exist if the firm exists, right? Opportunities and threats are external to the firm. They would continue to exist if the firm were to no longer exist, right? So, you know, examples of strengths are often things like, you know, state-of-the-art technology within the firm, right, in their products, right? Weakness might be that don't have enough people to properly do all the digital marketing that they need to do, right, or something like that, right? An opportunity would be that, you know, if say you're Oreo, right, that people are increasingly liking to eat more Oreos, right? Sorry, Oreos is a bad example because that then makes it strength. People are increasingly eating more snack food, right? I don't know if that's the case, but you know, that would be an opportunity, right? Because it's something that Oreo could market to. Whereas a threat would be something like, you know, at the same time, people are becoming more health conscious, and so therefore that's potentially a threat to Oreo's selling and sales, right? So, three major things here: target market description, competitive analysis, and SWOT analysis, or some sort of situation analysis if something other than SWOT is more important, or in addition. I did want to mention quickly, right, as part of your target market analysis, it might be very useful to generate a qualitative research study. I don't require it, right? But you know, I generally find that groups that spend some effort on this wind up with a better final project than if they didn't, right? So now, obviously, you're not going to, I don't have money to give you to send out a survey or anything like that, right? But what you can do is you can generate kind of essentially a simple survey in Google Forms or one of the various other kind of tools that are out there, and then, you know, send it to an email list of some sort, right? Like whether that be MBA students or something like that, or just your friends, right? To try and get some responses. I think it's useful for you to go through the exercise of building one of these surveys and kind of trying to see what the results are, even if the results aren't extremely informative of the target market that you're trying to reach, that their firm is trying to reach, right? So I don't want you to worry as much about, you know, making sure the target market matches as much as I want you to think a little bit about that. Again, it's not required, but, you know, I as I said, I think groups that do some sort of primary research like this usually wind up doing better than groups that don't. The final section I'm going to turn in a couple of weeks, in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, is the marketing objectives and goals. And this is what I was talking about, why I spent a lot of time talking about this in the conceptual assignment. I want you to state 3 to 5 SMART goals, an explanation of why you chose those goals, and the KPIs that show how success will be measured. The best format for this, and this, you know, usually I don't talk about format. We had a big discussion last time about project introductions, how I don't care about format. But after, you know, seeing many examples of this over the years, I think the clearest way to do this is just to have a bulleted list where you have the SMART objective as the first sentence, a sentence explaining why that's important, and then a sentence explaining what the KPIs are, right, that we talked about already. You know, it could be 2 or 3 sentences. I don't really care about the number of sentences, but some sort of kind of very clear format like that really helps to get the marketing objectives across. Okay.
Can I interject
Yeah.
with a question?
Yeah.
Just to be
Go right
sure
ahead.
I'm clear. The situational analysis is due on step 4 or section 4. This is due on March 5th, correct? Or
Yes.
Oh,
Yep, sorry.
okay, so that's not due this coming.
No. I just wanted to, because you just finished the introduction, I kind of wanted you to start thinking about this next section, right?
That's perfect. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. I was trying to look it up quickly, and unfortunately,
All
I
good.
accidentally closed the tab that had all the dates in it. So
I was about to furiously start texting Jason over there.
no. This is not due for a while. Let me mention that again, right?
Oh, good. Thanks.
This is let me double check the dates, but yes, March 5th is what it is due. Sorry, I meant to mention it right off the bat, but I had accidentally closed the one tab I needed for that. So any questions? I mean, obviously this is a ways off, as Rachel mentions, right? But I want you to start thinking about it, especially if you're going to do some sort of primary research, right? You probably need to kind of get that started sooner rather than later, right? Is basically what it comes down to. Okay. Well, any questions about the class at all?
I have a quick question. So for the assignment that's due this weekend, this Sunday, how much of the material should we have covered? Like, do I need this week's readings and videos and whatever to do that, or?
So I don't think you do. I mean, obviously, if you want to talk about search in this, I'm not going to take points off, right? If search is a major component of how you think Oreo should work, right? I have no problems with that. But I don't think there's any, I can't think of anything in the search videos that you need for this assignment. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, the class is usually set up so you only need like up until week n-1 weeks of content for completing the assignment in weekend, right? So yeah. Awesome. Well, any other questions, concerns? Anyone have a favorite commercial from last night's Super Bowl?
The Ram,
Tubi.
of course.
The which one?
The Ram EV, of course.
Oh, yeah. Christopher?
I thought, yeah, Tubi pulling the fast one on everybody, thinking they were sitting on the remote and changing the channels. That was
Oh,
brilliant.
yeah.
Everyone went.
Yeah. I kind of like the Ben Affleck Dunkin' Donuts one. I thought that was kind of good, for sure. And then the interesting one, I meant to look this up ahead of time, but did anybody see the anti-Tesla ad last night? So, Matt, did you see it?
I heard about it. I was looking forward to seeing that. I read a lot about it, but I did not see it. So
I saw it somehow. I forget. Matt, do you know which company funded it? Because it's listed as just like a generic not-for-profit, but I know it was one of the competitors who actually funded it.
I believe it's funded by an individual who has a nonprofit.
Okay.
But I mean, they have an axe to grind with
Yeah.
Tesla. So.
Well, it's always interesting to see the approaches people take in these, and I gotta admit I haven't had enough time to read through all the post Super Bowl commentary to see which ones are doing the best. But maybe that's something we can talk about next Monday after everyone's had a chance to put in their 2 bits about why they think certain commercials were better than others. The anti-Tesla one, by the way, just for those who didn't see it, basically was actually a video of real Tesla cars like running over dummies and things like that, just showing that Tesla trying to prove that Tesla autopilot doesn't actually work, right? And making a case for that, and asking why the National Transportation Safety Board allows it to continue to exist when it could kill people, right? And has killed people actually in at least one case, right? So interesting about.
I have a friend who works at NVIDIA in their machine learning and machine vision departments, and he was telling us that they were in talks with Tesla to sort of do a partnership, and Tesla ended up balking at their price. But in testing, this is secondhand, but it's directly from a high-level person at NVIDIA. He was saying that they could drive next to a black Tesla with a large mirror, and it would drive into itself because it's only looking at the cameras. It doesn't have any depth perception aside from what it sees. So reflection, a puddle of water, etc., can actually like repeatably, make that happen. And he said, they would attach a large mirror, drive next to it, and it would keep going that way, thinking that the lane is wider because it shows, at the right angle. But anyway, that's
interesting. Yeah. I actually have a good friend of mine who is he's co-CEO of Waymo, which is Google's play in the auto driving car, named Dmitry Dolgov. We went to school together. But I had a chance to ride in one of his early prototype cars at his wedding, and it was a lot of fun. It seemed to work pretty well then, but that was on a closed road and everything like that. And it's not the same technology that Tesla's using. So we'll have to see how this all works out. But yeah. Oh, the reason why I brought this up too, before we wrap up for the day, is Mr. Beast, who we started off today talking about before I turned on the recording, was actually briefly in a video yesterday in a commercial. I don't know if you caught it, but in the one for with the women's flag football champion or captain from Mexico, she runs by Mr. Beast at one point. Apparently, that's some sort of tie-in to him potentially releasing a new candy bar flavor for his candy bar line, which I thought was, I kind of want to, I need to look a little bit more into this, but it seems like an interesting, weird tie-in. I was like, why is Mr. Beast in this commercial that's for, women football players? That just seems like a weird combination of interest. So I need to find out a little bit more about that. He also texted something out about it to people who are on his text group today. So I'll have to look into that, and we can talk more about it next week. But any other comments, questions, concerns about the class before we end for the day? Or about non-class related marketing? Well, take care, everybody. I will be back at our normal time, Mondays at 7. I know it's been a little hectic over the last couple of weeks, but we're for the next, at least I think 2-3 weeks, we're back at the same time as normal, Mondays at 7. So look forward to seeing you all next week on Monday at 7 o'clock. Take care, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.